Welcome back, everybody. All right, I'm very excited about our next speaker. He is a private pilot, military aerospace historian. He's lectured across the country on the unique subject of mystery aircraft and classified propulsion systems buried deep within the military's industrial complex. He is a guest speaker at the Oshkosh Adventure 2006-2007 event, which was the world's largest air show. He's developed a number of contacts which have firsthand experience dealing with classified black programs inside former United States Air Force pilots, retired naval personnel, aerospace engineers that have maintained a top secret SCI, which is sensitive compartmented information clearance. In an effort to expose government fraud, waste, and abuse, he devotes much of his free time to exposing government fraud, waste, and abuse. He devotes much of his research in aerospace technical documents, conducting interviews, and traveling to multiple university archives. As a concerned citizen, it's his belief that it is our constitutional obligation to question authority and demand an accounting of special access programs that bypass congressional oversight and public scrutiny. So he's going to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart, something that actually guided my career decision when I first went to college. I wanted to be a physics major because I wanted to figure out how these things flew. And he's going to talk about propulsion systems today, so I am very excited. Please join me in welcoming Michael Schratt.
Well, good morning. I want to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to join all of you today. And what I'd like to do for you this morning is to give you a brief overview of some of the mission-critical UFO crash retrieval cases within the Leonard Stringfield collection. And the title of this lecture is Retrievals of the Third Kind, Cosmic Crashes, Corpses, and Cover-Ups. And this is really an homage to Leonard Stringfield. A lot of information to go through today, so I want to go ahead and get right into the slides here. UFO crash retrievals, the ultimate holy grail of UFO research. Now, why is that the case? Why are the UFO crash retrievals the ultimate holy grail? It's because this is going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. Because it's the UFO crash retrievals that have the craft, the bodies, and the debris all wrapped up into one entity. So this is going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. Anything less than this hardware, and we will all be here another 50 years and we still won't know what's going on. That's why it's so important. It is the final curtain call on the UFO crash retrievals. Couple of quick announcements before we get into the material here. The content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact per the description of the original source. The identity of first-hand sources will be protected per Leonard Stringfield's original agreement with his military contacts. The visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations and sketches which originated from the specific details provided by Leonard's sources. So on the bottom here, I'm giving you a cross-section of the caliber of military witnesses where Leonard got his information. So we've got 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So that's just a brief cross-section of the caliber of military witnesses where Leonard got his information. So, a couple of quick quotes. Number one, UFO crash retrievals can't be real because if they were, I would have read about it in the local newspaper. Okay? Number two, there are not now, nor ever have been, any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Now, this is their official press release July 1980. So what we're going to do in this presentation is we're going to take Leonard Stringfield's military witnesses and we're going to go up against the U.S. Air Force, according to their claim here, and we're going to see who comes out on top here. Okay, so I want to introduce everyone to the man of the hour here. This is Leonard Stringfield. This is the original gentleman who coined the term UFO crash retrievals. Over about a 30-year time period, he started collecting these reports from first-hand military witnesses, people who loaded up the craft onto 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks and shipped them to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Medical personnel, pathologists, X-ray technicians who were there in person during the autopsies. That's the kind of people that Leonard had first-type contact with. I want to go over some biographical points before we get going here. Leonard was born in 1920. He grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he'd already memorized the entire dictionary. They gave this guy a nickname. They called him Webster. This is the exact type of guy that you want cataloging all these crash retrieval cases. This is the perfect guy for it. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. During World War II, Leonard served in the intelligence service of the 5th Force in Southwest Pacific Theater. Leonard wrote 2 books, Inside Saucer Post 3-0 back in 1957. The other book, Situation Red, the UFO Siege, back in 1977. He served as the director of the world's largest UFO research group in the mid-1950s, Civilian Research Interplanetary Flying Objects. He received 8,000 letters in the first 2 weeks of existence. So there was a tremendous interest in what was going on here. This next bullet item, that's the one that we want to focus in on this morning here. His lecture on UFO crash retrievals at the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. Now, why is this the case? Because it was the first time that the whole concept of UFO crash retrievals really started to get on the radar screen. Roswell was just beginning to break into the narrative, and so the whole concept of crash retrievals was something new. The other thing that caused a stir at the MUFON Symposium is the agreement that Leonard made with his first-hand military witnesses is he was allowed to preserve an important part of our national history, but the names had to be kept under wraps. And so justifiably there were some pushback at the MUFON Symposium because there was no way to independently verify what these military witnesses were saying. He died December 18th, 1994. So what was the one event that sparked Leonard's interest in UFOs, which ultimately changed the course of his life? There was one event that happened to him that literally just changed the entire trajectory of his life, and it was this right here. On August 30th, 1945, Leonard had a Foo Fighter sighting from inside a twin-engine C-47 while traveling from Okinawa to Iwo Jima. So we have 2 Foo Fighters off to the left. He's kind of looking through the window here. One of the engines on the C-47 started sputtering, actually went out. They thought they were going to have to ditch into the ocean. But then these Foo Fighters peeled away, engine came back on, they landed safely. But he never forgot that. It completely affected him for the rest of his life. So, of course, I had to do some digging here. The Newcastle Sun, January 3rd, 1945. Foo Fighters are latest. Pilots flying over Germany at night report that strange balls of fire are following them around on their missions. They have christened these strange phenomenon Foo Fighters. Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19th, 1993. It says here, author continues quest for truth about UFOs. And then on the upper section here, quote, what I've collected has staggering implications for mankind. This would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. That's a pretty bold statement, right? If even one of these cases is true, then yeah, it matches that. At one time, there were 22 bank boxes of original drawings, sketches, correspondence, names, address, telephone numbers of all these witnesses. This is the kind of material that needs to be presented in open congressional hearings. This is what we need to track down these legacy witnesses here. So let me take you really quickly to the 1978 MUFON Symposium here. We're going to go inside, and here we see Leonard giving his lecture, Retrievals of the Third Kind, that started this whole crash retrieval uproar, what was really going on here. At the presentation, the symposium proceedings, he presented this document, Retrievals of the Third Kind, a case study of alleged UFOs and occupants in military custody. And he presented 12 cases. So it was really the first time that this had really come on the radar screen here. And I want to bring your attention to this book. So everything that we're going to be talking about today comes from Leonard's book. So it's UFO Crash Retrievals, the complete investigation, status reports 1 through 7. And it really has the interworkings of these military witnesses. However, I should point out that as you go through this document, might be hard to see here, what you're going to find out here is that this is very, it's text intensive. You really have to have an interest in this subject. There's no drawings, there's literally no sketches, there's no full color renderings. And so I thought, someone needs to drill down on these cases. Pick out the most mission critical cases, commit those to a professionally done refined drawing, and then use that as a guide or a template to generate a full color rendering to make these cases come alive. So over the past 4 years, this has been my crusade to continue Leonard's legacy and make these cases come alive through drawings and illustrations. So we've got 119 crash retrieval cases in Leonard's book. We have an additional 104 crash retrieval cases in Ryan Wood's book, Magic Eyes Only. So now between Leonard's 119 and Ryan Wood's 104, now we've got some serious firepower. The more cases that we have, the more difficult it's going to be for the United States government to keep all this under wraps. Let's continue on here. Now, before we get going, I want to take everyone to Las Vegas. And we're going to go to Caesar's Palace to the roulette wheel here. And we're going to go to the roulette wheel that has 120 spaces. And we're going to put down one bet for each 119 crash retrieval cases and military witnesses that Leonard identified here. And I think you can kind of see where I'm going with this. The numbers, we can't lose. We literally can't lose. All we need is one of these cases to be correct, and the whole concept of UFO crash retrieval non-existence completely falls apart. The numbers are in our favor. We can't lose here. That brings us to this document. Isn't it wonderful and isn't it beautiful that in this country we have something called the First Amendment, our right to free speech? And if you extrapolate this whole concept to its extreme, what this means is that the United States government doesn't own anything, right? We as taxpayers, we own the facilities, like Edwards North Base, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, McClellan Air Force Base, other facilities. We own the bases, we own the hangars, we own the runways, we own the aircraft, we pay for their salaries, everything, all the logistics support. Bottom line is, the United States Air Force is nothing more than a temporary custodian of these assets. We as taxpayers, we own this material. So we have every right to question authority. It's our First Amendment right here. Okay, that brings us to the recent congressional hearings in Washington, D.C. This is July 26, 2023. Ryan Graves, off to the left, Navy pilot. David Grusch, who I'm sure you've all heard of, U.S. Air Force Intel. David Fravor, Navy pilot, off to the right. Credible witness for sure, right? And this is what he said, David Grusch, quote, "I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval program." So we have a government official telling us that they do have an ongoing UFO crash retrieval program. Waterloo Region record, July 27th. 2023. Whistleblower says multi-decade program that captures UFOs is being concealed. So again, newspaper clipping is confirming it that we have this multi-decade UFO crash retrieval program exactly as how Leonard Stringfield's military witnesses told us years and decades ago here. I want to give credit to my good friend Rudy Gardea for doing these sketches and drawings in this presentation. Okay, so our first case, this is 1942. This is long before Roswell. Now, when this craft came down at an Army base north of Georgia that even Leonard didn't know was, when it came down, it ripped a whole breach on the side of the craft. Okay, this is page 319 in the book, so if anyone wants to follow along, I'm going to give you the page number so that you can verify this on your own. Crash measured 15 feet in diameter. It was 10 feet tall. Now, the only way the dimensions work on this, talking about the interior components here, there were three sections. There was a seating section, there was a control section, and then there was an entryway hatch on the bottom of the craft. The only way this works is if there is a central floor, cavernous, large interior, and then what we can call a sub-basement. 4 crew members were taken alive. They were 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin. The report also stated that there was a series of hieroglyphic-type writings written along the outer circumference of the craft, and then also on the interior upper dome of the craft. So we've got at least 5 other cases within the Stringfield collection that talks about this hieroglyphic-type writing. I'm going to do a blow-up here. Now, personally, I believe that there absolutely, by default, there has to be a transnational team of linguistic experts and engineers that are desperately trying to crack the code and decipher what all these symbols mean. They have to have 3-ring binders full of all this. There must be a team that's doing this. So let's see if we can commit this to a full color rendering. I want to take you inside the craft here. We're going to zoom up here. Here's some of the hieroglyphic type markings. We'll go up to the section here where they had the hull breach on the side of the craft at an Army base north of Georgia back in 1942. So now we're kind of going up the steps here. You can see the divider. This is the divider that separates the seating area from the control area. These are the seats here. Off to the right, you've got the control area. I'm going to do a blow up here, and this is the best illustration that we could come up with based on the witness that Leonard Stringfield did identify here. Off to the right, we've got the control area. There was mention of wraparound windows on the side of the craft as well. We'll do one blow up here of the control area. Something like this perhaps was retrieved by our government. And then the bodies that were recovered, 4 bodies taken alive back in 1942. So this is what's going on here. As we go through these cases, the craft count goes up, the body count goes up. All right, next one. This is Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. It had not become Wright Patterson Air Force Base yet until 1947. So back in 1946, it was still known as Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Our source is a 6-year-old boy named Tex Martin. However, his father was with him. So not only do we have Tex Martin, but we have his father. We don't have to rely on the witness testimony of a 6-year-old boy. This is UFO Crash Retrieval, page 242, 243. So what you see here on this photograph is a period-correct photograph of hangar complex number 4. It has 5 bays. The one to the far right is Bay E, which I believe where this all went down. So this 6-year-old boy, Tex Martin, he joins his father for an entire week at the base. And connected to hangar complex E, which I believe this all happened, there was a cafeteria. And there was a janitor that saw this 6-year-old boy. And this janitor said, you know what? This boy seems like a nice guy. Why don't I buy him a soda pop? So he asked his father if it would be okay. The father said yes. And so this janitor hands this 6-year-old boy this Coca-Cola here, and this is Rudy's drawing. This is all in rough format, getting all the monuments laid out in rough format. He hands him this Coke, and coincidentally, there was a military personnel that walked right through that door as soon as it was open. And our 6-year-old Tex Martin, he's looking through this doorway. What did he see? Well, he said he saw 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. There were chains connecting this tarp to the sides of the trailer. Then he said he saw a 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft on tripod landing gear legs, and then 3 deceased ET bodies on stretchers laying on the hangar floor. So let's see if we can reverse the viewing perspective. And we've got Tex Martin in the background. We've reversed the viewing perspective. Now we can see the interior. We've got the craft. We've got the two 18-wheeler tractor trailers. We've got the deceased ET bodies. So let's go to the refined drawing. And here's what we came up with to preserve an important part of our national history. Now this craft was 18 to 20 feet in diameter. It had two what looked like rims wrapped around the outer circumference on tripod landing gear legs. You see the military personnel. It specifically stated that there were two tractor trailers with unknown tarp debris, and then you can see the deceased ET bodies here. However, we want to take this as a guide or a template. We'll go to our full color rendering, and this is what we came up with, again, to preserve an important part of our national history back in 1946. All right, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, same location, same date. Our source is a private who worked in records management. Source on this one is Space, the Final Frontier, page 59 by Clark McClellan. And we're going to go to this one. This is the cover of the book so that you can verify the information where I'm getting this. And within this book was this sketch, interesting sketch by the primary eyewitness. He talked about a 15-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that was 7 feet tall. There was a series of rectangular windows wrapped around the outer circumference. Highly polished mirror reflective exterior. No visible means of propulsion. No wings, no supporting structure, no ailerons. This craft came in from Arkansas on a railroad flat car. So they shipped this thing all the way from kind of where we are, all the way to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Absolutely highly polished mirror exterior. No seams, no welds, no socket head cap screws, no hex head cap screws. Let's go to the next one here. Here's my AutoCAD drawing that gives you an idea of what this craft looks like. Now, if you look on the upper right, I've pulled back the skin, allowing you to see this 36-inch diameter central column that went from the base of the craft through the midpoint up to the top section where it connects. And then if you look at one window left of center, there's a red dot. What is the red dot about? Well, according to the witness, this is the attempted point of entry with diamond tip drill bits. They were attempting to get into these things. I've got 3 other cases within the Stringfield collection that talks about diamond tip drill bits desperately trying to get into these craft, and they can't do it. So wouldn't it be great to use the metallurgical science that they've gained from these crash retrievals and integrate that technology into our 6th and 7th generation stealth fighter technology? That appears to be what's actually going on. This was my first kindergarten child level illustration just to give an idea of what this may have looked like back in 1946. And then this is Joseph Race, much better refined illustration. And he's even got this red dot on the window as well. So that's kind of how this thing went down. Let's go to Rudy's drawing. Now, our source was a private in records management. He had to deliver a very interesting and important letter to a high-level military brass. So when he went to the hangar, he was met with an MP who was a friend. And this MP said, you know what? I got something I want to show you. Why don't you come follow me? So he brings him back to the hangar. This craft is sitting on the hangar floor. He said, off to the right, there was a partially folded up tarp. In the front, there was an open toolbox, and laying on the ground was an electric drill with a diamond tip drill bit. So he was at the right place at the right time when these lab coat technicians were changing shift, and so he got to see this craft. Let's go to the full color rendering. Something like this was being stored at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, back in 1946. So who has a need to know on this? I want to bring your attention to this document. This is a letter from Nathan Twining to Air Force Brigadier General George Shulgin, September 23, 1947. Here's what the document reads. The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. Later in this document, it discusses the form, fit, and function of these craft. It also talks about the flight characteristics. So this is one gentleman that had a need to know. Next one, Papagos Indian Reservation, west of Globe, Arizona, January 1947. We're not even at Roswell, and we're already 3 and 4 in here. This is north of Superstition Mountains. Witness served in the U.S. Navy during World War II, and this is page 93, case A10 in the book. So here you've got 2 personnel. They're going down this dirt, unimproved road within the vicinity of the Superstition Mountains, and they are challenged by 2 MPs with carbides telling them, you're not supposed to be here. This is a restricted area. Get out of here immediately. Evacuate the area. However, it was already too late because they were at the right place at the right time at the very beginning of this retrieval operation. And what they said they saw was another 50 foot down the road off to the left was about a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, 18 feet high. It had a low-rise dome on top, and then 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference with these indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference as well. So we'll go to the full color rendering. This was recovered back in 1947. We want to preserve an important part of our national history. However, I want to bring everyone's attention to this slide here. So not only do I have an interest in the craft that have been recovered and the bodies that were recovered, but I want to know what happened to the hardware, what happened to the debris. Within the Stringfield dictation notes, there was a 1-page document that highlighted something called Foote Brothers and Gear Company. So according to Mr. Robert Helmold, Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company of Chicago conducted metallurgical analysis on pieces from a saucer that crashed in Arizona back in 1947. Could be the case we just talked about. So I started to do some digging. I wanted to find out what this Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company, what do they actually do? What do they manufacture? So this is Chicago Tribune, January 15th, 1955. It makes gears as large as 21 feet in diameter, weighing 45,000 pounds, and others small enough to put on a watch chain. Its gears are found on airplanes of all types, including jets and helicopters. In a year, it will make thousands of different gears for use by industry. So if the United States government retrieves something from the Arizona desert area back in the late 1940s, and there was even a small section that had an arc radius with teeth on it that reminded engineers of a gear, they would have sent it to this company for analysis. Absolutely, it's checking all the boxes. Did some more digging here. Hendricks Commercial Register, 1909. You can see the size of gears this company makes. So this is absolutely the place you'd want to send this debris here. Purchasing agent, May 1923. You can see the size of the gears, all the way down to something you put in a watch. Perfect place to analyze this type hardware. Next one, White Sands Missile Range, July 4th, 1947. Our source is a technical sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force, page 196 in the book. So what you're looking at here is a slide that shows you the outer perimeter of White Sands Missile Range. Where the craft came down was on the northern part of the range, and this happened all at night. So here's Rudy's drawing. This thing was 150 feet in diameter. When it came in, it tilted at about a 25-degree angle, had a low-rise dome on top, very large craft. This is all at night. So the whole place was excruciatingly well lit up. They had light-alls shining on this. They had spotlights. They had searchlights. They had people with Geiger counters walking around this craft checking for radiation. They had people and photographers with still cameras taking shots of this. They had other people that you see on the bottom right with motion picture film cameras of this. So they have all this documented. Let's go to the full color rendering, and this is what was recovered, White Sands Missile Range, 1947, northern part of the base here. So what is the actionable item on this case? Since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this evidence for future public hearings. Now here's where the problem lies, right? Because a lot of these senators and congressmen, they don't have a high enough security clearance to get to the information, and they've never been read into the program. So how are they going to declassify something they've never been read in on? That's the problem that we're running into in Washington, D.C. UFO crash retrieval 1947, seen at all places, a warehouse at Berkeley University. We've got this guy's name. Albert Bruce Collins, deceased. He was a metallurgical engineer. This is page 197. So he's at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy truck backs into a warehouse at Berkeley University. I'm going to go to the drawing here, and you can see what he talked about. This is mentioned in the report. He said that he saw a 30-foot egg-shaped craft, which is all the rage now. We're hearing about egg-shaped UAP being recovered. This guy was before all the current whistleblowers. 30 feet across, 15 feet high, literally looked like a cracked egg, he said. There was a crack going from the top to the bottom. On the interior of the craft, there was a 36-inch diameter central core or yoke of the craft. On the forward portion, there was a composite panel. Wrapped around the outer circumference of this egg yolk was another composite panel. And then he said, on the bottom right of the craft, from his perspective, there was a hull breach and debris and shrapnel sticking out of the bottom of it, like there was an interior implosion. This is what he said in the report. We'll go to the full color rendering, and this is what this metallurgical engineer described within the Leonard Stringfield publication here. Be great if it was still there. Next one, Carrot Patch, south of Salinas, California, July, August 1947. The witnesses were two 19-year-old workers. The craft came down at night prior to them going to work the next morning. So when they arrived at work the next morning, the foreman came to these 19-year-old workers and said, you know what? Something came down in the Carrot Patch. I want you guys to go take a look at it. So they go over there. This is the original sketch that came with the report. This was not a large craft. This is 9 feet in diameter, 4 feet tall, had a double row of indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference. So that's the second time we've heard about this. And also within the 5-page report, there was a map. X marks the spot. So you can see the highway off to the left, 1, which is technically Pacific Coast Highway, and then here by Gonzales. So if we could go back to when this thing actually came down, I could probably take you plus or minus 200 feet where this thing actually came down. So the two boys, they walk over to this thing. Again, this is not a large craft. This is my AutoCAD drawing that gives you an idea what this thing actually looks like. 9 feet in diameter, 4 feet tall. It had a flat top. This is the SolidWorks rendering just to give an idea of what it looks like in color. So they walk over to this thing. One of them gets up enough courage to kick this thing with his boot. He made contact with it. Within 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes of those two boys arriving on the scene, there was a convoy of military vehicles that arrived. 2 Jeeps. There was a 6x6 covered troop transport covering a trailer. The two 19-year-old workers are told to vacate the area, but they did see the military personnel manhandle this craft, put it on the trailer, cover it with a tarp, secure it, and ship it out of there. They did see the whole operation. So here's our full color rendering. This is Salinas recovery to preserve an important part of our national history. Let's continue on here. So the $64 million question. This is one of Stringfield's witnesses here. Where are the top secret files on UFO crash retrievals being stored? Where is all this information? According to Stringfield's witnesses, they are kept in 3 large computer banks spread throughout the country. One was Wright Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. Well, that's no surprise. We knew all that a long time ago. CIA headquarters, Langley, Virginia. NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. And then he left us with this cryptic remark. They will bend in any direction to keep them secret. So when you talk about the crown jewels, the crash retrievals are absolutely the crown jewels. These guys they're very good. They will bend in any direction to keep them secret. So that's the files. Now, what about location of where ET craft are being stored? Same witness. NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Goldsboro, North Carolina. So it's very clear what the government figured out a long time ago. So let's say late 1940s, 50s, getting into the early 1960s. They knew that these crown jewels were way too important to be put into one basket. So what they did is They started diversifying their portfolio. They started putting things at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, MacDill Air Force Base, Eglin Air Force Base, all around the country. They cannot work on a single point failure. They cannot lose these things. So they absolutely diversified their portfolio here. Next one, C-119 flying boxcar, Sierra Madre Valley, Mexico, prior to 1951. I believe this case took place in 1948. Our source is an engineer. He worked in highway construction. This is page 32 in the book. So what you're seeing here on the screen is a C-119 flying boxcar. Now, we know how large the diameter of this craft is. We know it's no longer than 9 feet in diameter. How do we know this? Well, it's a mathematical certainty because the aft cargo bay of the C-119 is 9 feet 10 inches across. You have to allow 5 inches of clearance, so by default, we end up with a 9-foot diameter disc-shaped craft. Cannot be any larger than that, so this is a small craft. Here's Rudy's drawing that shows you the loading of the craft into the aft clamshell bay doors cargo area of the C-119. And we'll go to the full color rendering by Joseph Wright that you can kind of see the whole retrieval operation. Now, he also said that there were 3 ET bodies recovered as well. We'll do a blow-up showing you the loading into the aft cargo bay of the C-119. And then the primary witness said that this was not for the faint of heart. 3 ET bodies were very small. They were burnt. And he said that when he knelt down to touch their skin on their faces, the skin came out on his fingers. That's what he said. So this is kind of a gruesome scene here, but this is according to the first-hand witness. So let's see if we can bump up the realism here, and I'm going to take you into this case. So here you've got the C-119 that kind of flew in on the unimproved area. We'll do a top view looking down. This is about an 80-degree look-down view. And then here's the loading of the aft cargo bay of the C-119. You can kind of see the retrieval operation here. We just want to preserve an important part of our national history. Here's the actual loading process. And then this is what the ET bodies look like. So this is the C-119 Sierra Madre recovery. Naval Air Station, Sunnyvale, California, 1950, Hangar 1. Couple of things to report on this one. Our source is a radar operator, case B5, page 57 in the book. Now this is Hangar 1. This hangar still exists today. It is so large, it has its own weather inside. That's how large this hangar is. It used to be a Navy blimp storage hangar. So again, this is Sunnyvale, California, 1950, radar operator. So our radar operator, he kind of goes through a double door. He walks into the hangar facility. He is shocked to see about a 100-foot diameter dish-shaped craft just sitting on the hangar floor. It had a dome on the top. There was a series of porthole windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft. He's met by a guard, told to vacate the area, which he did, but he did for about a little bit less than 1 minute. He got a good look at this craft. So let's go to the full color rendering, and this shows you what this gentleman saw back in 1950. Again, craft count goes up, body count goes up. Now, we want to bring our attention to our good friend John Schuessler. That's where this case comes from. His father knew a security guard who worked at Wright Patterson Air Force Base back in 1952. This security guard said that he was present when a tractor trailer came in at night, and his job was to make sure that everything was on the manifest list, and he says here, everything delivered had to pass through me. So what he said he saw was a dish-shaped craft on an 18-wheeler tractor trailer covered by a tarp, and then he also said that there were bodies packed in crates. This is coming from John Schuessler's father. John Schuessler, I think, is a credible second-hand witness, so it comes from his father. I think we can trust John Schuessler. Here's my illustration of what this may have looked like back in 1952, recovery at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Pentagon, 1952, at an off-limits room. This is a Pentagon office worker, page 152, case A1. Now, we've got this Pentagon worker. We believe she went down to the basement at the Pentagon. So she's down there. It's a kind of a dark, dingy, dusty room. There's some cardboard boxes off to the right. It's not very well lit. She kind of makes this 180-degree turn, and what does she see, this Pentagon worker? She sees a large ET pickled body in a glass jar, and she can't believe what she's seeing here. Within 5 seconds, she feels this hand on her shoulder, upper arm area. It's an MP telling her to get out of here immediately. You're not supposed to be here. So let's go to our full-color rendering. Something like this perhaps was stored at the basement at the Pentagon. Now, I wanted to do some checking on this. I wanted to see, is there a basement facility, sub-area at the Pentagon where something like this could conceivably actually take place? So I started some digging here. Here we've got our great friend Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney gets lost in Pentagon basement. New defense chief gets lost in the Pentagon basement. Peninsula Times Tribune, March 25th, 1989. So here we have Dick Cheney. He's at this meeting on the upper floor of the Pentagon. Once the meeting was over, he went into the elevator. Apparently, he hit the wrong floor, thinking would take him down to the sub area where the car park is. Well, it didn't. It kept going down. He gets off into the basement, and he got lost in the basement at the Pentagon. So, yes, there is a sub basement where something like this could actually have taken place. Special note, something very serious appears to have been going on regarding UFO crash retrievals in 1953. This date keeps popping up again and again for some strange reason. Just keeps on popping up. 1953. So let's go into at least a couple of cases here. Fort Polk, Louisiana, summer 1953. H.J. is our witness. He's a private in the Army. This is case A1, page 80. This is what he described. When he got to the scene, the ground was still warm to the touch. And he said, and here comes this egg again, he said that he was a part of a team that retrieved a 30-foot-long egg-shaped craft against warm to the touch on the bottom ground area. He said that there was a flange wrapped around the outer portion of the craft that was still rotating. And then he said that there were medical personnel assisting ETs that were coming out of this craft. They were being assisted by medical personnel. One of their comrades was being carried off on a stretcher to an ambulance truck. Now, these beings were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. They had oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. They were wearing a one-piece, tight-fitting green flight suit. They had mittens on, believe it or not. They had a helmet on. And then the witness said something very strange and bizarre, which I haven't heard before on other crash retrievals. He said that these ET beings, they did not have a knee joint. They could only move with a hip joint. So they had this very strange stagger step maneuver when they were walking across the ground, according to the witness. So let's go to our full-color rendering by Joseph Wraith. You can see the egg-shaped craft. You've got the hot section of the ground. You've got the flange wrapped around the outer portion. Let me zoom in here, give you a little bit better view. Here are the ETs being assisted by the medical personnel. Again, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, all wearing a fully integrated one-piece green tight-fitting flight suit. Here's their comrade. Now, it said that they were trying to establish contact with their fallen comrade who was being carried off into the ambulance truck. And here's the blow up here. So this is what Leonard Stringfield's firsthand military witness is telling us about this case. So what happened to the survivors? That's what we want to know. According to the source, the survivors had been sent to a hospital and put into isolation, but all soon died. He also learned that the cadavers were sent to a medical center near Washington, D.C. So what is this medical center that keeps on popping up in a lot of these crash retrieval cases? Walter Reed Army Medical Center, closed in 2011. This is the place where a lot of these ET bodies were brought, were analyzed, tissue samples, autopsies, x-rays were done at this facility. Other witnesses from Stringfield talk about Johns Hopkins Hospital location of ET autopsy. So between these facilities, a lot of information, a lot of documentation, photographs, x-rays were certainly stored. Next one, Flown to an undisclosed location, this is April 1953, witness was blindfolded and driven 30 minutes from the base of operations. He saw a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that was being stored in a tent. He was there for a few days, and he had this metallurgical analysis equipment, and he was testing the tensile strength of this dish-shaped craft for at least 2 days. This is page 13, abstract 7 within Leonard's publication. Official note, previously uncleared scientists and engineers or specialists working on UFO crash retrieval operations are always blindfolded before they are transported to a site where top secret UFO research is being conducted. Multiple times we hear about these contractors, engineers, test engineers who are first blindfolded, they're driven to the location, and only when they finally get to the destination is the blindfold taken off and they start their work because they don't want any breadcrumbs to follow where this actually took place. Next one, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1953. Witness saw 2 craft and 4 ET bodies packed in dry ice. This is Charles Wilhelm, page 16, abstract 10. So we've got another witness talking about 2 craft and boxes and crates with ETs packed in over at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Next one, 1953, same location. So you can kind of see all roads are leading to Rome, but in our discussion, all roads are leading to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Now, why is that? Because they have the Foreign Technology Division, where they can test the tensile strength of these craft, and they have the Aeromedical Lab, where they can test the tissue samples. So here we have 1953. This is an Army officer. Source page 15, abstract number 8 within Leonard's publication. So in this report, it talks about a hangar complex. It talks about a 4-engine cargo DC-7 landing at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. And again, this is hangar complex number 4 that has 5 bays. I've actually been inside this hangar. I believe it took place in bay number E, which what you see right here. So this is bay section E. And then he said that when this DC-7 landed at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, it taxied onto the tarmac, and then this whole plane taxis into one of these hangars. So picture this scene taking place in the hangar. He said that once it taxied into the hangar bay doors closed, and he was at the right place at the right time to see all this. And then there was an aft cargo bay door that opened up on the DC-7. Then he said that there was a forklift that kind of wheeled over there, and they start offloading these crates and these pallets. One of these pallets had 3 wooden crates with their lids taken off. He was standing about 6 feet away, and so he's kind of like peering inside these wooden crates, and he looks inside. What does he see? He sees 3 deceased ET bodies. They were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. Oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. He said they were all wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit, and then he said that they were being supported off the bottom of the wooden crates by this white netting material to protect them from the dry ice freezer burn below. He said one of them was female because it had breasts. He mentioned that in the report. So apparently one of these was female. They were all deceased. You got a very good close look at this. So let's go to the full color rendering just to give you an idea of what this may have looked like back at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1953. You can kind of see the mist rising up from the dry ice. I want to change the viewing perspective, give you a 90-degree look-down view. That'll take us to this slide. Something like this was recovered, according to this witness, back in 1953 from a crash retrieval and sent to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. So what do these ET bodies look like? If we take all the information from Stringfield's doctor reports, medical personnel, X-ray technicians, people who were pathologists, if we plug all this information from military witnesses from Stringfield, we end up with this bullet item list here. So what do they look like? 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, 2 round almond sunken-in eyes without pupils, heavy brow ridge, large hairless head by human standards, no earlobes, no definitive nose, small slit for a mouth, very thin neck, small torso, wearing a metallic flexible garment. Time after time we hear about this one-piece tight-fitting flight suit fully integrated onto their bodies. Arms described as long and thin, reaching down to the knees. Hands have 4 fingers without thumb, slight webbing between the fingers. Short and thin legs, no toes. Skin color, beige, tan, brown, tan, pinkish gray. So if we take all of these parameters, we come up with a drawing. This is what we're going to end up with. Being retrieved by medical personnel, military personnel, multiple first-hand witnesses within the Stringfield collection. All the bullet items are laid out for you on page 46 and 47. This is the best drawing that we could come up with based on Stringfield's medical personnel. Now, if we commit this to a full-color rendering, this is what we're going to end up with, being retrieved by military medical personnel. Walker Air Force Base, New Mexico, April 12th, 1954. Something I want to point out here regarding Walker Air Force Base. This base was renamed Walker Air Force Base. It used to be called Roswell Army Air Center back in 1947, which we're all familiar with. Years later, it gets renamed. Our source worked in 1954 to 1955 in the Air Force. He was a photographer. He was only 18 years old, so this is a young guy. But he was an expert in photography, film development, exposure. He knew everything about cameras. And so he thought, I want to put my expertise to work for the U.S. Air Force. This is page 82 in the book. So he's told to board a H-19 helicopter with 3 other crew members. So they all pile into this thing. Once they're in, they close the door, and there was an address system over the PA address system in the helicopter from the pilot. And the pilot said, quote, "Men, this is not a drill. This is a red alert scramble." So they take off, they head northbound. Roswell's to the south. Highway 285 is off to their right. They head northbound. They make a 45-degree left-hand turn. Now they're heading toward Corona, New Mexico, where the debris field was back in 1947. They go over this low-rise hill as the sun is kind of setting, so it was kind of getting a little bit dark, but it was still light out. When they go over this low-rise hill, this is what they found, according to this 18-year-old photographer. There was a 50-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that augured in at a 45-degree angle. It had a low-rise dome on top. There was a series of multicolored lights wrapped around the outer circumference, which were still rotating. He's hovering above this scene. He's told to open up the bay door. There was a spotlight shining down on the scene, and our 18-year-old photographer proceeds to start taking photographs of this whole thing. The whole thing was documented by photographs. He said that he could see 4 deceased ET bodies near the craft. Now, they land the helicopter. He gets out, and he said that something becomes immediately apparent the second he gets out this helicopter. He said that the whole localized vicinity smelled like ammonia or battery acid, something that we hear about in Retrievals. The whole place smelled like battery acid. Within a few minutes, all these trucks and jeeps and 6x6 troop transport starts coming. He could see their headlights, so he was at the very beginning of the retrieval operation. He was told to go no closer than 40 feet. He was also told by one of these retrieval operation military police that 2 additional bodies were found inside the craft. So in addition to the 4 outside, a grand total of 6 ET bodies were recovered. We want to go to the full color rendering of this case, and this is what we came up with for our 18-year-old photographer who was on this retrieval operation. He was the photographer, documented the whole case. Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1955. This is Mrs. G. We absolutely need more women in this field regarding witnesses. We want more women in this field. She worked in the Foreign Materials Division at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Information was provided by Charles Wilhelm. This is page 17 in the book, abstract number 12. Again, she worked at the Foreign Materials Division back in 1955. This kind of gives you an idea of where she worked at. It looks like the closing scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark. You've got this big warehouse with all these crates and boxes. This is the kind of area that our Mrs. G worked in. So here's Warehouse Operations Building 258. Now, what this woman stated, I think, is very important for our discussion. She claims that she processed 1,000 components that came from an interior of a crash retrieval. I want to report that. This woman who worked at Wright Patterson Air Force Base back in 1955 said that she cataloged over 1,000 components that came from the interior of a UFO crash retrieval. So when we hear about senators and congressmen in Washington, D.C., they always say, well, we don't have any physical evidence. Here's our Mrs. G. She cataloged 1,000 components that came from one of these things. So it's her testimony up against these senators and congressmen. So I said, Rudy, you got to give me a drawing of Mrs. G, and you can see here to the lower right here. What they did is they had this whole thing set up like an assembly line. When the debris came in, there was a station where a guy had a table and he photographed the debris. It moved over to the next section, which you can kind of see here, and then the debris was bagged and tagged. And then they moved it over to Mrs. G, and she cataloged all this material. Now, while all this is going on, she said that there was a mobile dolly that rolled by her desk. And she said that there were 2 deceased ET beings being preserved in this formaldehyde preservation fluid. She got to see not only the bags and tags of all the debris, but she saw 2 ET bodies as well. So I told Rudy, give me this warehouse building, and I want you to have all this shelving on here, and start populating all the shelves with all this debris. Now, we don't know what it looks like because we weren't there. We had to come up with something. I want to take you to our full color rendering here, and you can kind of see Mrs. G in the background. You've got the 2 deceased ET bodies. You've got all of the populated shelving with the ET hardware. So they can't claim that they don't have any physical evidence. It's Mrs. G's word up against the United States government. Since over 1,000 components of physical ET hardware exists, this evidence should be tracked down by senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances and should be presented in open public congressional hearings. Absolutely. This needed to happen decades ago. So not only do we have Mrs. G, but we have June Crane. She grew up in Dayton, Ohio, worked for the United States government between 1942 to 1952, worked in classified laboratories. She had a Q clearance. She held debris at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Stated that by 1952, the U.S. government had been involved in 3 UFO crash retrievals. Spoke to a pilot that stated that he flew in ET bodies and wreckage. So we've got 2 witnesses now that are talking about craft being recovered, shipped to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, and bodies as well. All of that information is put together by a book from James Clarkson, and this is Tell My Story, June Crane, the Air Force and UFOs. Absolutely credible witness. She was a librarian, not the kind of person that would lie to us here. Wright Patterson Air Force Base, April 1962. This has to do with 5 personnel who were part of the 354th Tactical Air Command Fighter Wing. I tend to trust the testimony of military pilots. So it's 1962. The leader of the Tactical Air Command Fighter Group was responsible for their physical well-being. So they're on this jog in the morning at Wright Patterson Air Force Base back in 1962. They're going along the row of hangars, and you can see the joggers here. They were looking for a 4th wall to complete their handball racquetball court. So they're jogging through these row of hangars. One of these hangar doors is open. They run inside. They see a 15-foot diameter dish-shaped craft being suspended by 2 engine test stands. There was a rope with stanchions marking this area off, and there were multiple MPs with carbines guarding this craft. This is page 88, case A6. Now, he's challenged by one of these guards, told to vacate the area. I'm going to go to our full color rendering. This gives you an idea of what this may have looked like back in 1962. But I want to take you to this jogger and the testimony that he was recorded within Leonard's publication here. Here's what this guy says. The guard challenged by saying, quote, "I don't think you're supposed to be here, sir." I replied to the affirmative, and we turned about face and departed, mumbling to ourselves that the good old U.S. had developed, or had all along, flying saucers in service. So here's another case of this military pilot who was at the right place at the right time, saw it by accident, credible witness testimony. Braniff International Airways. Why is this important? Why is Braniff International Airways important to our discussion? Because we have another Stringfield witness. This is reference 53, date 1963. Source PJ, captain in the Navy and a pilot for Braniff International Airways. He encountered 2 flying saucers in a hangar at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. One was 30 feet in diameter, could hold 12 people. There was a smaller one that could carry 2 people. So now we've got another case of a pilot. He was in the Navy. He saw craft at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Santa Rosa, New Mexico, spring 1963. This is page 217 within Ryan Wood's book, Magic Eyes Only. So I want to give credit to Ryan Wood. What he describes is a X-ray lab technician. She was 24 years old at the time. There was a call that came from the dispatcher. The doctor joined the X-ray technician. They go into this 1963 Ford Galaxy ambulance, so they all pile in here. They travel across town. When they get there, according to the report, this is what they see. They see some wreckage off to the right. There were about 3 ET bodies that were 3.5 feet tall. Her exact words were, quote, "Where are their parents?" She thought she was looking at children. She wasn't quite sure. So they ended up taking the bodies into the ambulance truck. They drive this ambulance car back to the hospital. Here's our full color rendering that gives you an idea what this may have looked like, according to the primary eyewitness. So then within an hour of arriving at the hospital, the United States Air Force arrived and ordered all 3 bodies to be removed. They also confiscated all the paperwork, notes, graphs, charts, and even undeveloped x-rays. The x-ray technician said she saw a flatbed truck outside with an object that was covered by a tarp. So they got the debris, they got the wreckage, they got the craft, they got the bodies. And then this Air Force colonel leaves her with this cryptic remark, quote, "This did not happen. You are never to speak about this. And remember this, the government has a long arm." So here's this tactic of bullying witnesses. This is what we heard about in Roswell back in 1947. A lot of the first-hand military witnesses that held the debris, they were intimidated, they were threatened, they were bullied. So the same thing was going on here. December 1963. This is like my favorite case within the Stringfield collection. This is literally days after President Kennedy was assassinated on Daley Plaza, November 22nd, 1963. This is Cherry Point, North Carolina. Roy Baker is our name here for our military U.S. Marine. Page 152, case A2. That's the reference for this particular case. Next slide shows you Cherry Point, North Carolina. So our witness, who is a U.S. Marine, he's told to board a plane with blacked out windows. So he gets on this plane, and they fly 3 hours from Cherry Point, North Carolina, to an undisclosed location that he didn't even know where it was. When the plane lands, he gets there, they open up the hangar doors, and this is what he sees. He sees a 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, 15 feet tall. It looks like a fat hamburger. Highly polished mirror reflective exterior. There were 9 opaque elliptically shaped windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. Again, highly polished mirror exterior. No visible means of propulsion. No wings, no ailerons. He said that there was a seam on the craft, which was an entryway hatch, but this seam was so fully integrated into the skin of the craft you could not tell it was even there. Nothing that you could put a razor blade in. We hear about the same thing at the Giza Plateau in Cairo, where you can't put a razor blade between the granite blocks. Same thing was going on here, so fully integrated. He said that this thing was being propped up on scaffolding. They had a catwalk where you could walk around this thing. And then he said that there were lab coat technicians with diamond-tipped drill bits, and they were trying to pierce the skin of this thing. That's what you see on the red dots, which were the attempted point of entry with diamond-tipped drill bits. Here's Joseph Ray's full color rendering, gives you an idea of what this thing looks like. We'll go to the next slide here. These are the 3 attempts that they made. So attempt number 1, diamond tip drill bits, failed. Attempt number 2, acetylene cutting torch, that failed as well. Number 3, they tried a laser. We'll talk about the laser. That failed as well. So what you're looking at here is not a reproduction. This is the sketch from the actual Marine back in 1960. This is his original sketch. And what he described is a 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, looks like a flat hamburger. You can see the scaffolding. Under the scaffolding, you've got these black marks. These are the pads that were supporting the craft on the scaffolding. Upper left and upper right are very high intensity lights. The whole area was excruciatingly well lit, so there were no shadows on the ground. If you look one window left of the center line, you'll see that little dot. Again, that's the attempted point of entry with diamond tip drill bits. Back in 1986, one of Leonard Stringfield's associates tracked down this witness and he interviewed him. This is the sketch from Michael Johnstone, a little bit refined. So this is back in 1986 when they interviewed him. And you can see that there was a 1-inch lip between the outer skin of the craft and the outer portion of the opaque windows. That's visible on the left part of the craft itself. So this is the Michael Johnstone. Now I tracked down Michael Johnstone. It's been about 8 years. I did a 2-hour videotape interview with him. He laid out the entire case itself. And he also provided me with original sketches, drawings, and notes from the primary eyewitness as well. Here's my little bit more refined drawing of the craft itself. The whole thing was being supported on scaffolding about 5 feet from the hangar floor. Again, you can see in my detailed blow-up view this 1-inch lip between the outer skin of the craft itself and the outer portion of these opaque windows. Directly below the craft was a white painted circle that was painted on the hangar floor. His job as a guard was to guard this craft for 2 weeks, and he said that I was tasked to shoot to kill anyone who would walk across that line. Like shoot now, ask questions later, that was his mandate. So let's go to Joseph Ray's full color rendering. This gives you an idea of what this craft looked like. This is December 1963, according to a U.S. Marine. John McNeil gets credit for the first color illustration of the whole case. So you can see all the scaffolding. You've got the laser device, which I'll talk about. You've got that white painted circle on the floor. This is according to the Marine back in December 1963. So what I want to do now is I want to walk you through this facility. We are going to penetrate this chain link fence, and I'm going to take you inside this retrieval operation here. So now we're inside the fence. We're going to get a little bit closer here, and you can see the personnel that this Marine talked about. We've got lighting around the whole area. You've got the white painted circle. We've got the scaffolding. We've got the catwalk. He wasn't the only guard there. And then he also said that there were these CIA types there, like in black suits. He talked about that. So you've got military personnel, you've got white lab coat technicians, you've got CIA types, so this is a rather extensive operation here. This shows you kind of where they were trying to breach the hull of the craft. You can kind of get an idea of this 1-inch lip that surrounded the elliptical shaped windows. This is a 45-degree look-down angle, gives you a real good look at this white painted circle. And he was there for 2 weeks guarding this craft. Multiple notes on this. The last day he was there, he said that they were lifting the craft off of the scaffolding. They were putting it on a cradle attached to a tractor trailer. They were putting tarps on it and moving it to the next location. So here we have the cradle device, and they're going to string this tarp over this cradle device. Right now we're about 50% tarped up. This is 100% tarped up and getting ready to move to the next location. And so what you can see here, one of the reasons why they're able to keep all of this under wraps is, number one, they compartmentalize this information. Very few people at the top know what's really going on. Number two is they keep moving these assets from one location to the next. That's how they're able to keep a lot of this under wraps. This is Rudy's first pass drawing that gives you an idea of what this actually looks like here. Now, getting back to this laser. Once the diamond tip drill bits failed, They said, you know what, let's try acetylene torches. That failed as well. And then our Marine, back in December 1963, according to Leonard Stringfield witness here, stated that they brought in these 2 tractor trailers with these large electrical generating devices on the trailer. And then they strung these heavy gauge cables from the trailer inside the hangar. They connected that to a laser. They did have lasers back in 1963. They weren't the best of intensity, but they did have lasers back in December 1963. They turned on the laser. It hit the side of the craft, bounced, reflected, and damaged a ceiling tile. When they moved the laser away, it was warm to the touch, but made no effect back in December 1963. So you can kind of see what they've done here is over the past, let's call it 80 years, they've used our tax dollar money within USAP programs, unacknowledged special access program, within the black world. We're talking of projects that were born black, died black. We'll never hear anything about it. They're using our tax dollars to reverse engineer the metallurgical sciences of these craft and integrate that into our aerospace assets. That's clearly what's been going on here. So here you can see the reflection and the damage of the ceiling tile, which talked about by our first-hand military witness. This is his original sketch of this laser incident. You can see the reflection here and the bouncing up. Then he said that the lab coat technicians that were working on this craft in the hangar, they all had these color-coded badges, which we've heard of before. So if you had a green badge, you had access to this part of the facility. If you had a yellow badge, you had access to this part of the facility. If you had a red badge, you had full access to the entire facility. So this whole concept of color-coded badges comes up again and again. Now, again, his job was to frisk people who walked into the facility. There was one time when he was alone within this hangar facility, and nobody checked or frisked him. He brought in a small German Minox camera, and he took a shot of this thing with his Minox camera. And he said, someday I will tell this story, and by God, people are going to believe me. However, that photograph was lost in a flood back in 1983. So we were this close of getting this real good piece of evidence, but it was lost in a flood back in 1983. So isn't it funny how the evidence and the physical hardware is always 2 steps ahead of us? We get so close, and it just gets ripped off from below us here. So I thought, let's do a replica. What did this photograph look like if we could go back in time? And this is what we came up with. So it would be a little bit out of focus. It would be a little bit grainy, perhaps a little bit brown in age, but something like this was taken by our military personnel back in 1963. Paul Nitz, U.S. Navy Secretary between 1963 to 1967, he plays a role in this because, according to our witness, there was a U.S. Navy Secretary who almost got shot because he started walking across that line. It would have been this gentleman right here, so he would have had a perhaps need to know. That brings us to this gentleman. This is 4-star Major General Melvin F. McNichol, Base Commander, Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. Why is this important? Why am I bringing up this Melvin F. McNichol, Tinker Air Force Base? Well, I did some digging on this guy. Ex-Tinker Commander Melvin McNichol dies, Daly, Oklahoma, July 11th, 1986. This is his obituary. So he is who he said he is. That brings us to Charlotte Mann, who is intimately involved in the 1941 Cape Girardeau crash retrieval. These two were friends. So you've got Charlotte Mann, you've got Melvin McNichol. They were friends. They had an interest in UFOs, both of them. So Charlotte turns over to General and says, well, General, we're friends. We've been friends for many years, and we have this mutual interest in UFOs. You've never told me anything. Are we still friends? I don't even know. You never even told me anything. General turns to Charlotte Mann and says, Charlotte, if you ever repeat what I'm about to tell you, I'll deny it, and it could end my career. He proceeds to tell Charlotte Mann 3 things. Number 1, he said that he saw a UFO which was located in the West. That's interesting. Number 2, he walked around a UFO on a catwalk, which was propped up by scaffolding, sounding really familiar. And then he said bodies were recovered and one was still alive. When I heard this from Charlotte Mann back at IUFOC in Phoenix, this is about 8 years ago, I said, I got it now. I got it. Because now I have independent confirmation from 2 separate sources describing the same thing. The general says that he saw a UFO which was located in the west. Our Marine said that he flew on a plane with blacked out windows from Cherry Point, North Carolina, 3 hours by plane. That puts you within the vicinity of the west, so that's checking out. The general says he walked around a UFO on a catwalk propped up on scaffolding. We just have his original sketch. This craft was propped up by scaffolding. There was a catwalk. Bodies were recovered. One was still alive. Our Marine witness stated that he overheard water cooler talk by these lab coat technicians talking about bodies being recovered, and one was still alive. So when I heard this from Charlotte Mann, I said, now I got it. Primary witness J.K. served as an NCO in missile intelligence at Wright Patterson Air Force Base in the mid-1960s. Claims to have seen 9 alien bodies under glass in an underground facility at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Source, Leonard Stringfield dictation notes. So we've got bodies being recovered, craft being recovered, stored at an underground facility at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Important note, this witness also claimed to have been present at Wright Patterson Air Force Base when Senator Barry Goldwater visited and was denied access to seeing UFO hardware. So as you know, General LeMay, bomb him back to the Stone Age, Curtis LeMay, he was friends with Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater had a huge interest in UFOs. And so Barry Goldwater turned to the general and says, General, I know you got a secret room at Wright Patterson Air Force Base where you keep all this stuff. Can I go in there? General LeMay turns to Barry Goldwater and says, damn it, Barry, don't you ever ask me that question again, because if you do, I'll have you court-martialed because I can't even get in there. That's basically a direct quote. How do we know this? We've got letter to Stringfield from Barry Goldwater, December 3rd, 1974. Here it said, I made an effort to get into the room at Wright-Patterson Field where the information was stored, and I was denied this request, understandably. So here we've got documents that discuss Barry Goldwater's attempt to get into this. New Yorker magazine, April 25th, 1988, page 43, talks about his relationship with Curtis LeMay and how he tried to get access to the quote-unquote blue room where they keep the craft, debris, and bodies. Larry King Live, most of you probably seen this. This is back in 1994, MUFON Journal. They brought in Larry King. They had a little snippet on Barry Goldwater's interest here. I'm just going to read you what it said. This is Area 51 Live from Area 51, 1994. I think the government does know. I can't back that up, but I think that at Wright-Patterson Field, if you could get into certain places, you'd find out what the Air Force and the government knows about UFOs. I called Curtis LeMay and I said, General, I know we have a room at Wright-Patterson where you put all this secret stuff. Could I go in there? I've never heard him get mad, but he got madder than hell at me, cussed me out, and said, don't ever ask me that question again. So this is according to Barry Goldwater. Something like this perhaps is being stored at an underground facility at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, according to that witness. Next one, Cherry Creek, Nevada, summer 1964, page 243. This is from Ryan Wood's book, Magic Eyes Only. I want to give credit to Ryan Wood. So here's the map here. Unincorporated, population 72 back in 2012. September 21st, 1872 is when it was founded. So if you go to Cherry Creek, there's not a lot going on here, but this has to do with a copper ore car from the Nevada Northern Railroad Company, the Eli route. So you've got this copper ore train going around this mountain bend, and we'll go to the next slide here. This is what actually happened. The leader of the train slammed on the brakes because he saw that ahead of him, all of the train tracks were ripped up, they were torn up, they were twisted like pretzels. They also said in the report that there were 3 ranchers that saw all this going on. When the train slammed on the brakes, these ranchers skedaddled out of here. So we'll go over the bullet items here. The Ely sheriff was alerted, who informed the Ely Armory to dispatch the local National Guard. The military ordered all people on the train to board a truck and were driven back to Ely. Military examined the craft and found the bodies of at least 2 little people, they called them. There was a third that we believed walked away because they identified the footprints. So perhaps 3 ET bodies were recovered. I want to go to the next slide to give you a full color rendering. Something like this was recovered. Now, what did they do next? We'll go to a little bit different viewing perspective. You can see the shrapnel, the torn up railroad tracks. Obviously, they had to slam on the brakes. The report said that they brought in, and this is what the craft may have looked like. It was flipped over basically 180 degrees on its top surface. They brought in the largest rail crane they could, picked this up, they put it on 2 trucks and shipped it out of here. So that was the retrieval operation for that particular case. Fort Riley, Kansas, December 10th, 1964. Our source served in infantry, 1st Division, Aaron Quebec, that's his name. Page 24, abstract 20. So that's all the references. So if you want to follow along in the book, that's where I got the information. Map of Camp Forsyth. So we've got 3 personnel. They board this 6x6 troop transport. They're brought over to Camp Forsyth. This is all at night. They get off. They walk about a half mile into this large open field. Now, while all this is going on, they said that there was a Huey UH-1 helicopter hovering above the scene with a spotlight shining down. It's making this crisscross maneuver, like it's looking for something. What they end up finding is about a 48-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, 18 feet tall. It has a series of 10-inch by 10-inch square protrusions or projections wrapped around the outer circumference. There was a fin at the back, and then below that fin, what looked like an exhaust port. So let's go to the full color rendering. This is my very first SolidWorks rendering. Gives you an idea what this looks like. We'll go to Rudy's drawing. So here you've got the spotlight shining down. His duty was to guard that craft for the entire evening. He said that there were hazmat personnel, there were people with Geiger counters checking for radiation, according to the military witness. We'll go to the full color rendering by Joseph Wraith, and you can see that the retrieval operation is definitely ongoing here. We'll do a blow up, and this is going to be our next case here. Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1966. Civil service electrician. Page 17 in the book, abstract number 13. Now, this gentleman worked in the photo lab. So when he got out of the photo lab, he took something with him that night. He had it in his suit coat, in his breast pocket. His son was home that evening, so he walks over and he says, "Son, I got something I want to show you." He pulls out an 8x10 glossy black and white portrait photo taken somewhere in the Southwest. There was a lab coat technician to the left. There was what looked like a military personnel with boots with khakis on the right, and they were holding up by its arms a deceased ET corpse, and this was a 8x10 black and white glossy. The son was shocked. He could not believe what he saw. Here's my color rendering of the same scene. Now, when he got back that evening to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, this is the next morning now, they discovered that the photograph was lost and he was fired on the spot. So it did not end well for this technician here. Next one, Southwest, July 3rd, 1967. Our source is a Marine, private first class. He was flown on a plane to an unimproved runway where they had this prefabricated hangar. And he was told to guard this hangar for 5 days. By day 3, it says in the report, curiosity got the best of this guy. So he walked over to the hangar. You can see it in the back of Rudy's drawing here. He opens up the flaps of the hangar, looks inside, and he said that he saw a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. He said there were lab coat technicians. In front of the craft, there were these benches with metallurgical analysis equipment. There were calipers, there were micrometers, and there were people with microscopes looking at material. Off to the right, he said, was a walk-in freezer, and then he said that there were body bags laying on the floor. He didn't see any ET bodies, but he definitely said that he saw a walk-in freezer. Here's our full color rendering. This gives you an idea of what this looks like back in 1967. Fort Hood, Texas, late 1960s. So right around 1968 timeframe. This is a private pilot. This is page 91. He had to make an emergency landing at Fort Hood, and within Fort Hood is something called Robert Gray Army Airfield. So we've got this Cessna 172 pilot. He has to make an emergency landing. He comes in at Gray Army Airfield, and this is what he said he saw. When he landed on this dirt runway, he said there was a Jeep that pulled up immediately. Within the Jeep were two MPs with .45 caliber pistols aimed directly at him. So that's what you see in the upper left hand. He's held at gunpoint. Now, while all this is going on, according to the 172 pilot, he said that there was a 400-foot long by 400-foot wide bypass door that opened up like a seam or a zipper. You would never know there's an underground facility here because the top section of this underground facility was camouflaged with dirt and grass and low shrubs. You would never know there's anything there. That's what he described. So what we have from other witnesses is that there were UFOs exiting this facility that were being escorted by military helicopters. So what we believe this is a staging area for man-made UFO test flights at Robert Gray Army Airfield. So is there a top secret underground facility located at Gray Army Airfield? That's the question we want to ask here. This is two notes within the report. The colonel stated that underground installations as well as isolated areas of military reservations have squadrons of unmarked helicopters which have sophisticated instrumentation on board that are dispatched to areas of UFO activity to monitor these craft or airlift them out of the area if one has malfunctioned. A UFO that malfunctioned, that sounds familiar. The colonel also said the technology that is being applied in this underground complex would remind someone of a science fiction thriller. It is unbelievable what they know and can do from this area. These are the type of helicopters that were seen exiting this facility. So you've got Bell UH-1 Hueys, you've got double rotor Chinook CH-47s escorting these UFOs. Now we talk about a malfunction here, and we have time for one more here. This is Cash Landrum incident. Most of you are familiar with this case. This is December 29th, 1980, Huffman, Texas. We've got three witnesses driving down the road around 9 p.m. Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, Colby Landrum. Colby's in the back. He notices this white light getting closer and closer, and then it's this double ice cream cone craft parks itself right in front of Betty's car. She slams on the brakes. They're looking at this thing. They thought it was the second coming of Christ. It had a blue-colored flame coming out of the bottom of it. Every time this craft would bob down, there was this blue-colored flame, and then the craft would bob back up again. Betty Cash, we'll go to the next slide here. She gets out of the vehicle. Remember, this is December 29th, 1980, Huffman, Texas, so it's still very cold out. She walks up to the forward hood of the vehicle. She's looking at this craft. For about 2 minutes, she's a first-hand witness. As she's going back to the vehicle, she reaches over to the handle of the car and she burns her hand. She has to take the leather flap of her winter jacket, lift up the handle. She gets inside. It's boiling hot inside. They had to turn the air conditioner on. This craft peels away, and then within a matter of minutes, there are no less than 23 double-rotor CH-47 Chinook helicopters flying after this craft. You all know the case here by heart, but this is the map from John Schuessler that I kind of cleaned up. You can see X marks the spot, and then 150 feet away, that's where Betty Cash slammed on the brakes. What did three Texans encounter? So you've got Betty Cash, Colby Landrum, Vicki Landrum, John Schuessler, our friend, was the primary eyewitness. This is Florida Today, December 4th, 1983. That's the area of where this all went down. So here is our full color rendering of what this may have looked like according to our 172 pilot who had to make an emergency landing here back in 1968. Also reports from the colonel and other witnesses indicate that there's a 4-engine cargo transport plane that can land at an underground runway at this facility. So not only is it an underground base and facility, but it's also an underground runway. So in this presentation, what I wanted to do for you today is give you a brief overview of some of the mission-critical cases within Leonard Stringfield's first-hand military witnesses. I wanted to commit these to refined drawings and full-color renderings to preserve an important part of our national history, and I want to thank you for your attention.